Hello and a warm welcome to you, wherever you are. Today we're going to go over a game which I had against a young boy, only 14 years old, but a pretty strong player, 1750, maybe 1800, I'm not sure. So yeah, he gave me a good fight, and let's watch the game. I was black, and he starts out with d4, and I played my prepared nf6. And here I had a chance to maybe go for my more familiar line, which is knight c6. But I've been studying the Nimzo Indian, so I wanted to try to play that potentially. And he happened to play knight c3, not knight f3. If he had done knight f3, I would have done pawn to d5. But with knight c3, I could play the Nimzo Indian, which is characterized by the bishop b4 move, pinning the knight against the king. He played a Queen C2 variation. That's a fairly modern and fairly successful. I think it's perhaps statistically the most sound way to play it. I personally, as white, play E3 here typically, which is I think it's the classical main variation or some shit. Anyway, so the idea now that the queen is defending the knight here, the idea is that if the bishop were to take, white doesn't have to capture back with his own pawn, doubling his pawns. Queen would be able to take it herself. So hence, I've chosen a line like d5 where it allows me the option to retreat my bishop if need be. Because I'm anyway not doubling the pawns. You should keep your bishop pair unless you really get something by not keeping it. So I decide to keep my bishop pair. Actually, the main line is to take the knight here because you've been provoked. So it tempoistically, it's the right idea to perhaps take it. But I wanted to keep more pieces on the board, so I kind of just held it. And here we got a few moves, and well, here I'm basically out of book and just sort of winging it based on my own gut feeling on the position. And I think b6 was the right idea. Um, Over here, yeah, I took it with the pawn. I think the pawn was pretty solid here. I could have taken it with the knight instead, but it leads to knight captures back, bishop captures here, and pawn forward, which is probably difficult for white to hold two pawns in the center. But at the same time, if he manages it, it could give him a pretty powerful attack. So I think it's better to take with the pawn. It's a bit more solid. I just have to make sure I don't lose the game. It's a 1750 after all, so I just got to play solid chess. Uh, yeah, a6 was just preventative because knight here, bishop here, a lot of pieces targeting the square, queen. So, so c5 is the main pawn break. They say in chess you need to have, if you don't have a pawn break plan, you don't have a plan. Okay, you need to be thinking of a pawn break. Otherwise, you don't know what you're doing in the game. You have to, everything you do has to be geared towards a strategic pawn break. And this is the main move here. But this was a funky move from him. Queen e2 was a bit funky, frankly, a bit unwarranted, a bit overly hopeful that I would play c5, allowing his bishop to come all the way back, and then he would bring his queen in front of her, making for a nice battery over here. But I'm not a chump, so obviously I'm not going to do that. Uh, anyway, so now the queen being on this file, I got the rook in here, long-term attack. And I'm ratcheting up the pressure on the center because I want to break it open and free this guy. And it seems like he feels the pressure rather quickly and makes a fairly, overly defensive move, I would say. Because I was happy to take that bishop. You should always take the bishop. Generally speaking, having a bishop pair is worth half a pawn. So unless you're making a major positional concession, you should almost always take the bishop pair if you can. But now we've got his queen under a lot of pressure and this knight. So f4 is made, and this is an annoying kind of squatter. It's a squatter knight in the middle. They can be pretty pesky to deal with. The key to beating them is to just not get angry with them. Think of them like that nagging wife that you're just going to have to live with for the rest of your life. All right. That's how you got to think of this knight. Um, but anyway, the right idea is to try to undermine the base pawns. These are not that strong, so you can maybe target them. He's making some pretty prophylactic moves, pretty advanced, for a 14-year-old boy to be playing a move like that is pretty impressive in its own way. He's quite a positional player, this young lad. Uh, but now you see the patience and the power of the bishop pair. With bishop pair, you can just hold it together. My knight here is rock solid because he doesn't have a dark squared bishop anymore. And because my knight is solid, my king side is going to be solid. I don't have to worry about it. There's almost nothing he can really do. So I can take my time and plan my attack and ratchet up the pressure on this pawn. So that's what I do here. And yeah, he's holding it. Okay, here is actually one of my first mistakes, I would say, like proper mistakes. The whole flavor of the game is right here. You see, it's all here. This is the game zone, right here. Yeah, too many arrows. To do an offbeat move like this is deflecting away from my core strategic focus. So it was a wrong idea in principle. Anyway, now we have a bit of a tactical sequence here, which leads to f6, pinning the knight to the queen. So he finds the one move he needs to find that kind of saves him. Otherwise, his knight was going to go. Because now, if I were to capture here, his knight could come in here and fork my thing, thereby making it such that if I take with the rook, he would take my queen with his knight. So kind of keeping things a bit more even than I would like them to be. So I decide to move the queen here. He's counterattacking my bishop. I'm attacking him and defending the bishop. He takes a second pawn, and then I snap up the knight. So what we're left with at the end of this whole sequence is 4 pawns versus my bishop. That's the net difference. But black has the clear advantage. Positionally, strategically, it's black's game to lose because it's just not possible for white to push forward in this kind of a situation. With these pieces the way they are, it's just very difficult. The extra piece is really significant. And look at the tactical possibilities are also coming here. That's how I was able to win a pawn right there. Okay, now we have a check. It's in black's favor to trade off as many pieces as possible. Literally, if all the heavy pieces were to be swapped off, it's almost impossible for black to lose because you have the extra piece. All you got to do is oppose the enemy's king and use your bishop to gain moves whenever you want to play a waiting move. So we got this situation, and now I decide to I could have gone for the pawn. I could have gone for all of these pawns, but it would have allowed him to maybe spice up the game a little bit. And there's really no significant need to go for those pawns, so I just want to simplify the game. That's why I'm attacking this pawn, which provokes this move, because I want to play queen here. That's going to attack here and provoke g3, the only way to defend it, which allows me to check him, and now he has to move his queen in the way. If he didn't move his queen in the way, if he moved his king here, it would be check and queen here and checkmate right there. So I forced the trade of queens, and this was a planned move by me. I really planned it all the way through. And now at the, it's just mopping up the tail here, just finishing off, making sure you remain a little bit focused. But endgames are also quite subtle. He played quite well. You see how he kept his rook on the board. He didn't swap off the rooks. He tried to hold as many pieces as he could. Because that's the only way to make it challenging. He understood that. So anyway, we've gone for this pawn. And it was very important that the king move here. I think if the king moves here, you're really unnecessarily getting into tricky territory because his king could come here and threaten mate. Okay, all of a sudden you could be under a lot of pressure, and you don't want to be in a situation where you are forced to make a move like this in order to not get mated, because well, he can just check you and really bind you down back there, which is also not pleasant. But B, he would it would allow him a chance to capture one of your pawns. And these two pawns are the only way you can actually win this endgame. Because if you trade off the rooks and this pawn, and even if you have the bishop, you need to have at least one pawn to be able to make a queen there. Um, but not this pawn. If it's only this pawn, it's going to be a draw because white's king will be able to hide in this corner, and black will never be able to checkmate him or advance the pawn. It would lead to a stalemate. So it's very important to keep your pawns on the board here. You have to be quite careful with that. So that's why I play a kind of solidifying move here with the rook. I'm patient. You've got to be patient. And yes, so just slowly improving the position one step at a time. Now really putting pressure on this pawn. King is also in threat, so he starts to check. Doesn't quite know what to do. And now when he's attacking the bishop, I play rook a4. You want the bishop, you can have it. Because if you do, it's g6 check and then mate over here from the rook. So he does this instead, which leads to a different kind of mate. Check and checkmate. So there you have it. That's the game. Hope you enjoyed this video.